Kia ora folks, so I have been fascinated with marble sculptures. The fact that they can create emotion, movement and warmth from such a cold medium is mind-boggling. Anyway, obviously steel is what I like to work in, so I want to push that envelope further. I've done the face, so what's next? The torso. Now we're not going to make a monolith of a sculpture this time. I want to make something that's more viable for the home. So we're making a bit more of a smaller torso sculpture, something that will also serve a function, so it's going to be a light shade, and hopefully evoke some emotion and warmth from the cold steel. That's the plan, bit of a medley of things to achieve. Let's get cracking. I want to create a mold which will actually be able to fill up with all the metal parts that I want to use and hopefully encapsulate all those design features and delicacies that I've gone ahead and already designed. So I printed out the mold, which will then sand smooth so it actually demolds, because that'd be a bit of an issue if it all just stuck together. And then we'll be left with a negative of plaster of Paris, which we can go ahead and fill up with all those parts. Right, let's sand these smooth. They're rough because I used my Ender 3 and it's struggling. With all the parts sanded and smooth, the last thing we want to do is add a coat to this. You could do a paint, a resin, pretty much anything that's going to leave a hard, smooth layer, and that's just going to allow us to demold this much easier because it's really hard to stick to. I'm just going to use a water-based urethane because that's what I have on hand. For the base plate of the mold, I've got a melamine sheet here. It's super smooth and non-stick, so when we mold on it, it will pop off nicely. You often find them as shelves, so I'm possibly missing one from my cupboard. Right, what we need to do is cut all the parts out that's actually going to assemble to build our sculpture. Now, because this is a light piece, we can't use all these solid parts that I had initially planned to. Why don't we create a Voronoi pattern, which is a bit of a cell structure of our plant, but with pipe. And if we use pipe, we can stack it up in the mold and it will really create all that sense of movement, form and shape that we're trying to go for, but yet it will also have a beautiful, intriguing pattern that will cast a gorgeous shadow. What we need to do is modify the drop source so we can actually cut out evenly hundreds of these little parts. I am on fire! Not ideal. The little bumpy stoppy's all done. It works out fantastic. We can now repeatedly cut the exact same dimension, which is a huge time saver. We have the parts cut out. They're 15 millimeters long and we have 500 of them. Yes, 500. What an insane amount. That took hours on hours, but hey, they're cut out. But if you look at them, they are super rough. So what we need to do is grab the grinder and deburr all of them. Woo! In the rain again. Fantastic. Anyway, there's nothing for it but to press on. Also, my headphones blew up. What the heck? Anyway, they were not waterproof, so it's really my fault, isn't it? Let's crack on. We're at a very exciting stage, and that is prepping the mold for casting. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, adding a mold release agent. Now, there's so many options, literally mold release wax, which is meant for this, quite expensive though. Or you could use like spray on, like oil that you use when you're cooking, or talcum powder, and a couple other options. But with those thinner ones, you'll often find they mix with the plaster of Paris and mean there's like a layer that never really sets. Terribly annoying. Don't ask how I know. Anyway, we're going to use Vaseline. Super cheap, off the shelf, and it's thick enough and hard enough that it will fill in all the nooks and crannies so we can get a smooth mold that's gonna release hopefully. Just mixing up our plaster. I'm actually using casting plaster. Water, then you mix. You do it the other way around, you'll get some lumps and bumps. Not conducive to a smooth casting, is it? We're using fiberglass to reinforce the structure, so when we actually demold it, you know, it doesn't just fall apart and crack. So, well, at least I hope. I big brained this and added handholds so we can pull it apart and it is super easy. The mold is done, finally. I may or may not have got carried away, like usual, and just kept pouring in on the inside and sanding it back, but anyway, we're now done. Definitely was not necessary. I've drawn up all the sections around all the trouble parts, and we'll assemble everything normally, but just won't weld along those lines, and then we can separate, pull everything out gently, and hopefully the mold is still in good stead to, you know, reuse a couple times. We're going to have to stop there and then start cutting some more because we're out of all the small parts. Oh, how unfortunate. Oh well, it's coming along quite nice though, isn't it? You know what the other issue that I didn't foresee? It doesn't dissipate any heat. The whole thing's so hot. It's like a little oven. Right, here we are. We're just about to cut up some pipe section. Actually, you've seen this before. Right, I'll see you inside. We have our parts. Now, it did take hours and hours. I'm sure there's a better way of doing it, but hey, we've got them done. So, we need to continue the build. Now, I've got a confession. I think it's a little bit dense at the top here. There's a little bit too many of the small parts and not enough of the big, so we shall apply that down to the bottom. Remember, this is Mark 1, so it's more about our learnings, so then we can apply them to Mark 2 and make something even more gorgeous. Which, by the way, I've actually already started planning. Hear me out. Right, waterfall, thick at the top, you know, dense, comes down, spitter spatters near the bottom as it breaks up down. Imagine that with this style. You start at the top and then you work your way down and it breaks apart. So, you know, even melting, you know, like if you had a candle and you melted it and it was dripping, oh, that is what I want to do for the next one, I think. Because I thought, oh, how cool would that be? Imagine doing it upwards and then it's like against gravity. That would be really weird too, wouldn't it? I think it's done, so let's try and pull it apart. And hope it pulls apart, actually. I guess that's more what I'm worried about. By the way, that's the mold, which is still good condition. Fantastic. We now have all the parts. I guess the hard thing is to see how they actually assemble together, because I don't really remember, do I? Right, let's grab the welder and join it up. It's looking rather splendid if I do say so myself. Now I do need to clean it up with the Y wheel. There's a bit of splatter and just a bit of roughness that needs to be cleaned up. So let's bring it outside and do that, hey? It's quite heavy too. Now, before we paint up this thingamabob, we need to look at how to mount it. Why don't we use round bar, or rod, or whatever you call it, bottom, top, make some hooks on little placards, mount it to the wall, and hey presto, you have some very low profile, much more difficult to mount though, mounting hardware. Now, yes, you only mount up once, so we can take that sacrifice, just to make this look less intrusive and more pretty. Anyway, let's jump over to the plasma cutter, and I'll show you what I came up with. That's a reference, by the way. There's no more welding to be done, so we need to clean, prep, and paint. finished the sculpture. Now, I definitely think I hit the brief, which is kind of the, the most important thing, I guess. Unless you, well, it's probably not the most important thing. Anyway, it's definitely imposing, isn't it? It's probably just the red paint. I think the paint's literally called Flame Red. Does that? Yeah. Anyway, I'm really happy with it. It's very heavy, and I do not think it needs a light behind it. It speaks for itself enough without having a glaring bright light behind it. I ended up making that sculpture that I was talking about, the cascading one. Well, here it is. I think it looks alright. Definitely adds a bit of intrigue, so less is more, and that is true in this case. No, it's not really true, is it? More is more. Anyway, the fact that we don't have an arm and no neck and legs adds a bit of intrigue, and the thinner parts really do, it does make this more delicate. So this doesn't fill up an entire room with again, the flame red one definitely does fill up an entire room, and probably the room next to it. Overall, really happy with the sculptures. They do look, I think they look quite nice. But the coolest thing I think that we did in this video, the fact that we went from plastic to mold. That mold is reusable. We can make any sculpture out of it. We can fill that up with nuts, bolts, washers, scrap steel, literally anything that you can weld together, and hey presto, you have a torso sculpture. Now obviously this can be pushed far more than his torso. You could do one of your face, and I mean 3D print, 3D scan your face. We could take this very far. In fact, maybe in the future we shall push the envelope a little bit more, and then yeah, we'll see where that takes us. I have actually created a Patreon. If you just want to support what what I'm doing or really enjoy it, then that would be really appreciative. Now I'm not sure what I'm going to provide on that. I have started to film and create like a video on me making this sculpture, so maybe I'll have extra videos. Who knows? We will see, I guess. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Set.